Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Notre Dame fans. Whenever you're tuning in to this week's Notre Dame Six-Pack Show, you could be watching live. I don't know what part of the world you're in. You could be watching back, so who knows what time it is. So whatever the case may be, thank you for making us a part of your day. I'm Mike Singer. I run the recruiting and YouTube operation here at Blue and Gold. And with me today is, of course, Jack Soble and Tyler Horka, the Blue and Gold beat writers. I'm going to trust that these boys are well, so we'll skip the introductions and the pleasantries. We'll tell folks to hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course, for more content. We're going to dive into this week's Six-Pack Show in just a moment. We have 6 Notre Dame football topics, and for each of them, we're going to take 6 minutes and chat about it. The first one here, boys, new ESPN FPI. So, Jack, you're our resident nerd, so I'll let you tell people about the ESPN FPI and why they even need to care about it, and what do we need to know here?
Thank you for the resident nerd distinction, Mike. So the new ESPN FPI, the Football Power Index, it's basically ESPN's analytics system. Why you should care about it? You shouldn't put too much stock in it, but it's an interesting data point that we have. It provides a number that's basically how many points Team X would beat the average college football team by, based on a number of factors. It's a lot less transparent about how it gets there than SP Plus, but it has Notre Dame at number 7 with an FPI score of 18.1. The teams ahead of it are in this order: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. And it also gives a bunch of projections. Like, it projects Notre Dame's win-loss at 9-3, or at 9.3 and 2.7, which that was an interesting part to me, because typically with these things, Notre Dame's strength of schedule is a little lower. FPI has it at 38th, which is another interesting thing we should talk about. But usually it has Notre Dame's projected win-loss higher than its FPI, but it does not in this case.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those win-loss projections. So I'm looking at the second chart that you included in your article here, and I think the thing that stuck out to me was Miami and Texas A&M being included in the top 10 of that chart. So it's a lot of the same teams that you just mentioned when laying out the actual FPI number. Like you said, Notre Dame's was 18.1. Texas, for reference, is number 1 at 28.5. So there's about a 10-point gap there. But some of the same teams, like I said, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, Penn State, Oregon, Clemson, Notre Dame there at 8, Miami at 9, Texas A&M at 10. And as you astutely put in your article, Jack, I think that's why maybe Notre Dame's projected win-loss total is 9.3 and 2.7, is because you have a couple of losable games at the beginning of that schedule. Let's face it, being on the road at Miami is tough. And then coming home 2 weeks later and hosting Texas A&M, also a tough game. So I don't know if they're going to be as tough as ESPN's FPI is saying, though. I get it. This is not what these rankings are the top 10 teams in the country. But I'll throw it over to you on this. I don't think Miami and Texas A&M are top 10 teams in the country. Do you believe that? And if you do, then maybe you're thinking 9-3 is actually in play for this Irish team. Like, I just don't see that.
So I think Miami and Texas A&M could be top 10 teams. They have the talent to accomplish that. I don't think I'd put them there right now, because there's still some boxes they need to check. But again, like, this is not the end-all be-all. It's a data point. Maybe we should have led with you, Tyler, because your Longhorns are the heavy national championship favorite per FPI with a 24.1% national championship chance. Notre Dame's, for what it's worth, is at 2.7, a 7.3% chance to make the title game, a 45.6% chance to win, to make the CFP, and a 7.0% chance to win out and make the and go 12-0 in the regular season. So yeah, like you said, Tyler, the projected win-loss is likely a result of Miami and Texas A&M being outliers as far as what's his name, FPI, is concerned with the rest of the country. I also thought it's interesting that Notre Dame's schedule is 38th in college football. It was, according to the one source I found, because if you go to ESPN FPI from last year, their schedule is ranked 4th, because that includes the CFP. But so I found a strength of schedule ranking from the end of the regular season, and had them at number 57. So this schedule is projected to be a little bit still not hard. Like it's behind the entire SEC and all but 2 teams in the Big Ten. With the only 2 outliers being Illinois and Maryland. But it's harder relative to the rest of like the ACC. Like Notre Dame would have the 6th best schedule in the ACC per ESPN FPI if they played in the league. So I thought that was interesting. It also confirms what we thought about the schedule, and that like it's tougher than last year, but it's not necessarily tough.
Yeah, and let's continue the strength of schedule conversation, because with everything that Greg Sankey has said in the last week, I know our message board has had some fun with a bunch of SEC teams getting ousted from the college baseball tournament, which is a completely different conversation. But like with the SEC, you have a team, and I think it was crazy to mention, Texas with a 24.1% chance to win the national championship per ESPN's FPI right now. Like that is an insanely high number. You got 1/4 of, like, if you flip the coin 4 times, like one of those times it's going to say, or like spun a wheel is a better example. One of those times it's going to land in a quadrant that says Notre Dame or Texas is going to win the national championship. That's insane. Mm-hmm. And yet the projected win-loss total, Jack, is still roughly 10-2. Like the SEC is so hard that you take this 10-2 team, and yeah, that team's probably got the best chance to win the national championship. So all of that considered, I kind of like where I am if I'm Notre Dame, saying, and I've been saying this since the last season ended, get by Miami, get by Texas A&M. You are at worst 11-1 with a slip up somewhere, maybe 12-0, and you got a really good shot to run it back and win it all.
And I will say, while the SEC is certainly difficult, I do think Georgia and Alabama are overranked by FPI.
Boys, you guys had that interview with Marcus Freeman last week in terms of local media, getting to speak with him. So Tyler, or actually we'll throw it over to Jack first on this one, just general takeaways. And I know you did an article on that.
Going big picture first. Let's start just with the USC series. Freeman was an unequivocal supporter of it, which I mean we wouldn't have expected any other answer from him when asked about this. This has been Notre Dame's position, but it was interesting to hear Marcus Freeman say it, and he also said, like, I don't care when we play them, if it's beginning of the season, end of the season, middle of the season, like he would prefer Notre Dame play USC every year.
I think that was a little bit of a shot at USC, right? Because didn't it get out through some reporting last week, maybe the week before, that USC, for one, we already knew, only wants to do the 1-year extension. That is different from Notre Dame. Notre Dame wants the long-term extension. The second part, though, was I think USC would prefer to play Notre Dame early in the year as like a neutral site thing, or maybe just get it out of the way. I think I read this somewhere, just like, hey, get it out of the way. We don't want to have to go to South Bend in mid-October, like is normally the case. And we don't want to have to end our season against what is probably going to be a really tough Notre Dame team at home. And I think that's what Marcus Freeman was saying there was, I don't care where, I don't care when, like I want to play USC. So like you said, Jack, just completely different rhetoric and tone from, say, what Lincoln Riley has been. I don't think he has a direct quote since Big Ten Media Days last year. Maybe he was asked during the lead up to the game last season. But yeah, like Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, they want to play USC. And I think that's a good thing. It was very sound, the way that he conveyed it last week.
More big picture, something interesting that he said. He talked a little bit about the national championship and kind of the pain and devastation that came with that night. And it's important to know that like those wounds have not and probably will never heal. And Freeman pointed out correctly that, like, well, I mean, he wouldn't say this, but he wouldn't say Notre Dame's a less talented team than Ohio State was. But I mean, while that was the case, Notre Dame didn't play its best game on a night that they needed to. So I thought that was interesting. The other interesting thing that he said about kind of surviving the long season as a whole was, I'll read the direct quote here. You're going to have to roll, guys. Stop making permanent decisions based on week 1. Let the normal football season play out. You're going to need depth. You're going to need depth. That's what they all understand. And I think that's such a pertinent thing to say in this era of college football, because you're going to need to you're going to need to play 15, 16 games to win a title. Chances are you're going to need everyone on the 2 deep, certainly, and a lot of those guys who are 3rd deep on the depth chart. The guy I look at, everyone points to the offensive lineman last year. The guy I look at as a great example is Junior Tui Halamaka, who was the third Viper to open the season and wound up being a huge contributor in Notre Dame's first major bowl win in 30 plus years. So it's those guys, and like we honestly have to change how we talk about like third stringers too, because like when we see like, oh, Boubacar Traore is playing ahead of Junior Tui Halamaka, it's like we don't need to think about 44 the rest of the year. But I mean, obviously that wound up not being the case. So like it's a good reminder to us, to the coaching staff, to the players, that like if you're buried on the depth chart in week 1, that might not always be the case.
Yeah, you think you have two surefire season-long starters in Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray, and Leonard Moore ends up being a starter for half the season and a freshman All-American. I think Junior Tui Halamaka is a great example. And then there's like micro examples too. I think of Jadarian Price against USC. Like that is a close game until the 2 pick sixes. Jeremiah Love injures his knee. It's looking kind of bleak. Jack, we were sitting right next to each other in the press box looking down, like, they going to be able to run out this game without Jeremiah Love? Jadarian Price says, I got this. Let me run in a lengthy touchdown right here. Like, we're going to be good. So those are the micro examples. And then the more macro ones are like Junior Tui Halamaka becoming a necessary piece, and the offensive line pieces that you said. So yeah, depth. It's always so vitally important.
The last thing, kind of big picture before we move on to some nitty-gritty player updates, was Steve Angeli. Freeman finally addressed that. We had talked about on the show. The key phrase, and then here in Pop's mic, excuse me. The key phrase is, it was sadness for me because I love Steve Angeli as a person and a football player, but I support him because it was the right decision for Steve. So that seemed to be Marcus Freeman like acknowledging that what we all assumed, that Steve Angeli has a better chance to start at Syracuse than he would have had a chance to start at Notre Dame.
Also mentioned Steve Angeli getting his degree, which I think is something Marcus Freeman says time and again when this is the case. Like Marcus Freeman's such a stand-up guy that Jaden Mickey, I think, also just graduated from Notre Dame a month ago, I guess now. And like Marcus Freeman probably has different feelings about that one, because Jaden Mickey would have been a useful player for Notre Dame, considering what I just said about Benjamin Morrison going down and you needing a lot of cornerback depth, because who knows if you lose guys at that position, all of a sudden you could be just totally screwed. But Marcus Freeman is so stand up that like even he probably was like, okay, love you, Jaden. You got your degree. This makes it so much better that you're leaving. Same thing with Steve Angeli as well.
Mm-hmm. Jack, let's get into that nitty gritty. What'd you guys learn from specific updates about the players? And I'll even throw out the whole Viper or not Viper thing.
Yeah, I was actually going to start with that. So personnel adjustment for everyone keeping track at home. They might still have a Viper and a field end listed on the roster, but Freeman said that at least for this year, because of the personnel that they have, guys like Boubacar Traore, Jordan Patello, Bryce Young, Tui Halamaka, we mentioned, Josh Burnham, who quietly had a much better year than people think last year. They're going to start calling those guys right end, left end instead of Viper and field end this year, because they want them to be a little more interchangeable.
Yeah, and I thought the coolest thing, being able to sit there in like a smaller group setting with Marcus, it did feel a little bit more intimate in that way. He had like a roster in front of him, because I guarantee you he was anticipating some specific questions about players, which we're about to get into. But when he was asked about defensive ends, he literally looked down on his roster and he was like, does it even say Viper anymore? And you can tell that he was actually looking to see if it said Viper or if it said left end or right end. So that tells you how like real this change is in terms of kind of phasing Viper out, if you will.
He was asked about the receivers, and I think this was the good article you wrote the other day, Tyler. But starting with Jaden Greathouse, some strong words from Freeman on him. And so Freeman said Notre Dame and Riley Leonard specifically had to learn this by the end of the season, that like when Jaden Greathouse is covered one-on-one, he's not open. This is a direct quote. When Jaden Greathouse is covered one-on-one, he's not open, or he's not covered, excuse me. Throw him the ball. So that's kind of an admission, acknowledgement, or whatever, that like Jaden Greathouse, at least from Notre Dame's perspective, his breakout at the end of the season was not Jaden Greathouse figuring anything out. That was Notre Dame figuring out Jaden Greathouse, because he's a little unique as far as receivers go, in that like he's not your typical like go up and get a contested catch guy because he's 6'1", but he's also not going to run away from people, so he might not be wide open all the time. But you look at the numbers, like a pass to Jaden Greathouse was one of the most efficient and effective plays in college football last year. It was certainly one of Notre Dame's most effective and efficient plays. Like his contested catch percentage was top 10, 20 in the country. His passer rating when targeted was way up there. So I think that was interesting. So and then the next logical question would be why wasn't he targeted more? I think Freeman kind of put it out there and said like, yeah, he wasn't targeted more because Notre Dame wasn't doing it enough. It wasn't anything Jaden Greathouse did.
Yeah, just 2 quick points on that, and you hit them right at the end there. The efficiency was awesome. Like that's great that pretty much every time you threw to him, good things happened. But now it's let's go volume with this guy because like he's that good. And sure, you're going to have some misses. Maybe a defensive back makes a heck of a play. Maybe the quarterback makes a bad throw. But the more times you throw to this guy as a junior, and I think he's like, we have to take that into account as well, the experience factor with him. What he did in those last 2 games, that's going to sit well with him. Now just start throwing him the ball because I think you can really up that production that way.
He also he talked about Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. With Pauling, it was interesting. He talked about how much like yes, he's a playmaker, but he's also a like you see him practice. He practices at a different speed and a different intensity than guys Freeman has previously coached, and that kind of reading between the lines that kind of struck me as like even if Pauling isn't necessarily producing on a given week, he's someone who's gonna elevate the potential, not potential. He's someone who's gonna elevate the performance of that. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Culture guy, like the Notre Dame wide receiver culture has needed a makeshift, a little makeover, if you will. And I think he's that. And then I think he's a little bit more. Like I think he will make plays, and Freeman did note that too. So he's like the best of both worlds in those 2 things.
So I think that's a big thing with Pauling. Like yes, he will make plays, but even if there's a week where he isn't, that doesn't mean he's not a valuable addition to this team. Freeman was also asked about Charles Jagusa, and he was kind of asked like, is right guard his best position, and why is that? Because he's going to play right guard this year. But he said Charles Jagusa can be a center, guard, or tackle. He's a freak. He's really freaking good. And he said that Mike Denbrock compared him to Will Campbell, who is the number 4 overall pick out of LSU, who Denbrock, of course, coached at LSU, to the New England Patriots. And while Campbell has short arms, I was knocking him. I think Jagusa's got longer arms than Campbell. And that's a good comparison because the intelligence that you always hear about with Will Campbell is something that people talk about with Jagusa as well, like the technical knowledge needed to play offensive line at that high of a level. Like that he's kind of a savant in that way. And of course the physical tools are out of this world as well.
Yeah, if you figure that Charles Jagusa is going to be Notre Dame's best tackle since Joe Alt, which I know it hasn't been that long, but like you have to put him up there in that air. Joe Alt wasn't getting quotes like, hey, he can play guard or center. And I get it. It's because he came in at left tackle in the year that Blake Fisher went down, and that's what he was. Like he cemented himself there. But I do think it is kind of cool and shows the versatility of Jagusa that like the conversation is being had, like, who cares where he plays? He's going to, wherever he lands, he's going to play really freaking well. And I'm just excited that we get to see this guy play a regular season game for the first time. That's another thing that Marcus Freeman said. He's like, I think he's only played 3 games. Yeah, they've all been in the postseason.
Actually, real quick before we move on, I got a scouting report on Jagusa from friend of the show, Jacob Infante, who was watching some 26 draft prospects recently. It's just a paragraph. I'll read it real quick. Definitely like what I see. Not a bad mover for his size. Powerful with a mean streak. Absolutely an ass kicker. Being that tall for a guard, pad level can naturally be sometimes be an issue, but wasn't as bad as he expected going in. Road paver in the run game. Hands are a little inconsistent, but he's shown promise there. Can't give him a massive grade yet, given a small sample size, but right now I have mid to late day 2 with potential to rise higher.
And an absolute sweetheart, too, is Charles Jagusa, getting to know him when he was a recruit. Wanted to mention this with Jaden Greathouse real quick. 9 of how many games were there last year? 16? Mm-hmm. 9 of 16 games he had 2 or less receptions. bizarre, including 5 straight games. Virginia, 1 catch. Army, 1 catch. USC, 1 catch. Indiana, 1 catch. Georgia, 2 catches. Talking against Georgia, 2 for 6 yards. Indiana, 1 for 8 yard. And then Penn State, 7 for 105. And Ohio State, 6 for 20 or 128. And of course, 3 total touchdowns in those games. Just, yeah, I really do feel like it's like, what the hell were we thinking kind of thing with Jaden Greathouse.
And I think Jack made a great point because he said it's not like Jaden Greathouse suddenly figured something out. Like this is the best Texas high school wide receiver of all time. You can make a case for. Like Notre Dame just figured out finally, like, hey, we need to throw him the ball.
Yeah, it seems pretty simple, but anyways, let's move on. We'll throw it over to you, Jack. Just other things from Freeman.
Yeah, other things from Freeman. An interesting note that he kind of went over, he kind of dropped at the end of his press conference was about injuries that happened last year. He thinks that Notre Dame actually, and this is going to surprise some people, he thinks that Notre Dame did a great job preventing preventable injuries. And what does that mean? So Freeman talked about a lot of non-preventable injuries that happened to Notre Dame this past season, like, someone falling into Ashton Craig's knee and his ACL snapping, or Jordan Botelho planting his foot and his patellar tendon rupturing, or any of the non-preventable injuries that you can think of, like the season enders that happened during games. Like Freeman believes those were not preventable injuries, and he also said this is one of the healthiest years that is the healthiest season they've had under Freeman in terms of preventable injuries, like injuries that happen in practice, which are generally, with obvious exceptions, considered preventable. So I think that's interesting in that, like, everyone was yelling about Lauren Landau during the season. We kind of pushed back on that a little bit. You can see pretty clearly where Notre Dame stands on that issue.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Jordan Faison getting his ankle rolled up on,
yes.
That's non-preventable in a game. Riley Mills toward the end of the season, Cooper Flanagan in the Sugar Bowl. Like, if you're saying Lauren Landau should be able to prevent an Achilles pop, like, that's not happening. And
yes.
If that is the case, then every training staff in the history of training staffs are terrible, because, like, Kobe Bryant popped his Achilles. Kevin Durant, basketball's different, but it's happening all over the place. Jadarian Price, for a couple years ago, popped his Achilles, and Lauren Landau wasn't even here yet. So I do think this was basically a Lauren Landau part of the press conference without it. I don't know if he even name dropped him. I've got the quote right here, but
he referenced the sports performance staff, not Landau specifically.
But him feeling the need to go in depth as he did on that, because he really did, is it's a byproduct of Lauren Landau being here, I think. And we'll see if some of those non-preventable ones stop occurring, which you think Notre Dame would get lucky in that regard, then people might be saying at the end of this year, like, whoa, yeah, maybe we do have something here with Landau, because this is probably a pretty healthy team. If those
he also said, like, if you look at the patterns over the years, the pattern is going to tell us that we're going to have one of the healthiest years in terms of non-preventable injuries in the game. That's just what the graphs tell you, which,
now you got to knock on wood. Now you got to knock on
wood as hard as he can, because obviously speaking that into existence is a dangerous game. But basically what Freeman's saying is, like, the majority of the injuries Notre Dame suffered last year were random, and things that are random regress to the mean. So that's not necessarily saying it's going to happen, but logically you would assume Notre Dame is going to be healthier this year than they were last year. So let's just obviously keep knocking on wood about that. Other stuff, Freeman did explain passing on Mike Mickens for the defensive coordinator job for the first time since that happened. And I thought his explanation was interesting and made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was basically, hey, we just lost this guy in Al Golden, who I think has so much experience, both college, NFL, older guy, wisdom type guy. Not to say that Mickens doesn't have experience at this point or is not wise in what he's doing, but Jack, if you have the direct quote in front of you, it was basically for what we lost in Al Golden, I felt like we needed to get a guy who most similarly resembles that, and that ended up being Chris Ash, not Mike Mickens. But guess what? You got to retain Mike Mickens in the process, which I think was a huge deal as well.
Yes, obviously a huge deal. Mike Mickens is, of course, the best at what he does at developing and coaching defensive backs. But he said he also referenced that Al Washington had actually been offered and turned down the Tennessee defense coordinator position at Tennessee a few years ago, which I believe I knew, but didn't know if that was like a on the record public thing. But now it is.
Now it is.
So he mentioned that with Washington, he's like, well, yeah, Washington was ready to be a defense coordinator too. But here's the exact quote. I believe Mike Mickens is, parentheses, ready to be a DC. For me, when I make decisions, it's more about what does this program need at the moment. And I believe at that moment, we needed a Chris Ash because of the traits that he brought to the program, the traits that we lost versus the traits that we wanted to bring in, right? And that is what went into that decision. So like you said, Tyler, like what are those traits? You can safely assume play calling experience was another. You can safely assume like kind of management in that like Chris Ash has experience overseeing a defensive staff. I think that's big. There are a bunch of other nitty gritty things that we probably won't even think about that defensive coordinator experience can bring. But I think that was a good explanation. Like the layman's terms is like nothing against Mike Mickens whatsoever. It's just that he wasn't what Notre Dame needed for that position at that time.
Yep, 100%. And like I said, you still have him. Like
yes.
That's probably the best case scenario was getting what Marcus Freeman wanted and him feeling comfortable in that while also having the guy that everyone thought was going to get the job.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't think this is clickbait because I'm going to read you the quote. Look, I put in the headline 2 QB system smokescreen. And here's kind of the thought here. This is not the first time that Freeman has mentioned something about potentially playing 2 quarterbacks. This is his quote in talking with Greg McElroy of the, what's his podcast called? Always College Football. He said, you're going to look for any way to help your team win. If that means you use 2 quarterbacks for certain situations, then you're going to find a way to use 2 quarterbacks. And then he kind of made a joke. There might be 2 quarterbacks on the field at the same time. Who knows? Creativity is so important. We have some creative football coaches and players that will come up with the right plan. So, I mean, do you guys think that this is something? Do you think it's nothing? And then anything else you'd want to say about these quarterbacks if your answer is short? Because we've got 6 minutes here.
Yeah, Tyler? I'll lead this off and I'll say you forgot the most important part of the quote, which was the very next part. You're going to have one starter. You're going to have one guy that's going to be your quarterback. But I can see us using both quarterbacks to find a way to help us win. That's if you're looking for the answer to this 6-minute segment, I just gave it to you in the first 30 seconds. But now we can get into the nuance and everything that goes with it. I think Marcus Freeman might be open to, and he was here during this season. He was the defensive coordinator. Like, if you've got to use Kenny Minchey as a Tyler Buckner type, and by the way, you still have Tyler Buckner on this roster. Wink, wink, wink. Things might get a little interesting in fall camp. But yeah, like Jack Cohn started every game of the 2021 season, all 13 of them. Even when things got a little hairy, you thought he might not start against Virginia Tech. He did, but then he got pulled. Buckner came in. He finished the game, this and that. He got injured against Cincinnati, whatever. You might have some of those situations in this season. Say CJ Carr's your starter. He's a sophomore. He's never done this before at this level. And some things don't go his way, or he gets dinged up. Like, you got Kenny Minchey right there. That's the part of the quote where Marcus Freeman is saying, we might need to use both quarterbacks to help us win football games. Like, that is just common sense. However, if CJ Carr does win this job and he is the starter, you're going to run him out there like you did Jack Cohn, and you're going to keep confidence in him like you did in 2021, because that's the guy that won a competition. That's the guy you have most of your faith in. Majority of the eggs are in his basket, if you will. And look, if Kenny Minchey comes in and runs a play similar to the one that he scored a touchdown on against Purdue in a more meaningful part of a ball game, heck yeah, you did your part. You used him in your game plan, but you're going to have one starter part of the quote, Jack, you agree with me, is the main part of this quote.
So I think clickbait is an interesting word because it's thrown around in a lot of different ways, and I'm often guilty of this myself. But the phrase 2 quarterback system, The word system is extremely misleading. The better phrase would be second quarterback package, because a 2-quarterback system implies there's no one starter, which Freeman has said multiple times he's not going to do. There's going to be one starting quarterback. But the package for the second quarterback, like you said, would be a Kenny Minchie, or even if we're getting really freaky, a Tyler Buckner, who is more athletic than the starter and is gonna come in to run some QB run tomfoolery. Like, they're not going to. They're not go. This is only if CJ Carr is named the starter, which again we don't know for a fact is going to happen. But if Kenny Minch is named the starter, they're not going to have like CJ Carr come in on 3rd and long. Like, that's just not how anything works. So yeah, that when people say 2-quarterback thing, system, package, whatever, in reference to Notre Dame, it's about Minchie, if he's not the starter, being a guy you can bring in a specific package. So maybe that's red zone, maybe that's short yardage, whatever. We've talked about this a little bit before, but that's basically what it is.
Look, we're not supposed to believe in cliches because we're writers, Jack, and we need to keep them out of our writing as much as possible. So I don't really hold. Yeah, that's true. Like the whole, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none thing. I don't completely adhere to that, but if you're forcing 2 quarterbacks into a game plan, then you basically have no game plan, because that just never seems to work. I go back to a season a decade and a half ago, University of Texas, Case McCoy, David Ash, and Mac Brown, and whoever the offensive coordinator was at the time, I can't even remember. They tried the 2-quarterback system thing, Jack. Like, it was actually a thing where one guy would go out there for a certain set of plays, and they would swap them in between series, during series. It was awful. It was horrendous. That Texas season went nowhere. So if that's what you're trying here with Notre Dame, it's not going to happen, because Marcus Freeman is smarter than that. Mike Denbrock is smarter than that. But again, I do believe that the most likely scenario of both quarterbacks being used in one game plan is CJ Carr is your starter. Kenny Minchie comes in and, does his thing, whatever you dial up for him. Tyler Buckner comes in, does his thing, whatever it is. And not to make this all about Texas, Jack, and make it the meme, but
I was going to say it, yeah.
What did Arch Manning do last year? He had a package, a play in the Texas A&M game. I think you might see that from Kenny Minchie. And look, that's not his goal for this season. I want to make that clear and on the record as well. Like, he wants to be the guy that's the starter in this case, from the quote that I just read from Marcus Freeman. And if that's the case, at that point, I don't think you have CJ Carr packages. You have a game plan if CJ Carr has to enter a game for whatever reason. But Kenny Minchie, the coaches have made it clear that he is the most athletic guy quarterback-wise on this roster. So he might have the package. If he's the starter, I don't think you even bother with the CJ Carr package. You just say, if CJ has to come into the game, here's what we're going to do with them. But otherwise, this is Kenny's show. So those are kind of the scenarios that I see. And in none of those do you force 2 guys into a game plan.
I think the 2 positions in football where rotation is a bad idea are offensive line, because it's so chemistry and continuity based, and quarterback, because it's everything is about getting your guy into a rhythm, and you can't do that if you're rotating guys. And great to know that Mark with glasses is anti-hydration. I'm just trying to keep myself healthy here.
I know.
Clickbaited the shit out of you guys. There we go.
I'm fine with the water drinking. Yeah, keep drinking that water, man.
Let's talk about some early. Let me pause the countdown. But yeah, I clickbaited the shit out of you guys. But I put a question mark. I put smokescreen in there. Listen, it is June 3rd.
If you use a question mark, that's just the rule of journalism.
Yeah, if I put Notre Dame to win the Super Bowl as the story headline,
but with a question mark.
But with a question mark, the answer in the article could just say no, because they can't win a Super Bowl. It's not clickbait, just asking a question. All right, so DraftKings Sportsbook came out with betting lines for 5 of Notre Dame's marquee games. Let me read this off to you guys. Unfortunately, I can't put up the visual. You just have to trust me, I can't. Favorite in all of them: at Miami, 2.5 points; versus A&M, 7 point; at Arkansas, minus 12.5; Boise at home, 15.5; USC at home, 13.5. Obviously, look, guys, this is June. Thank God we had that Marcus Freeman interview last week, because we'd be really strapped for content or not strapped for content for the show. So we're talking about early spreads for games that will happen in months from now. So Tyler, any thoughts on these spreads? Any? I don't know, brother. What do you got for me?
Yeah, I think the overarching thing here is that Jack, I think, pointed it out earlier in the show. If you think that Miami, Texas A&M, and maybe USC are your toughest games this year, well, here they are right here in the point spread, early point spreads. You're favored in all of them. You're going to be favored in every single game. If the season goes the way that you think it will, like as we're sitting here on June 3rd, what we think we know about Notre Dame, what we think we know about all of Notre Dame's opponents, they're going to be favored in every single game. So I think the one against Miami is a little more toss-up-y, if you will. So there's a scenario where you go into Miami Gardens and you lose narrowly, and only the people who love technicalities are saying, yeah, Miami upset Notre Dame. I don't really think that's an upset if the Hurricanes hold serve at home by a couple of points. But you look at some of those others, and yeah, there's opportunity for Notre Dame to get upset. Like if USC, which I think they're reeling a little bit right now. Chad Bowden, I know you went down there to like save the program or whatever, but what we know about USC the last couple of years is they've lost more games since the middle of Caleb Williams' last year there than they've won. So that's like 15 to 18 games of a lot of losing. If Notre Dame was to lose that game, that's an upset. I think Arkansas, Boise State, those are upsets. Even Texas A&M. The Aggies came here to South Bend and won. That's an upset. So, again, to kind of tie everything together there, overarching theme for me, Jack, is when these point spreads are coming out, I'm not surprised because I thought Notre Dame should be favored in pretty much every single one of their games, and turns out we're getting closer to that being reality.
So there are two big indicators of the national championship credibility bump that we've seen since that happened. There are others, but these are the two biggest. Number one is the recruiting success, which you can watch Mike and Kyle's show every Friday. Correct me if I'm wrong there. To learn more about. Number two is Notre Dame -2.5 against Miami, because that game is awfully similar between what we think Notre Dame is going to be and what the opponent is, because I see that Miami team, they're different in a lot of ways, but similar caliber to Texas A&M, or at least what we thought about them coming into the season last year. Or if anything, we think Miami's going to be better than Texas A&M was last year. And Notre Dame is a 2.5 point favorite on the road instead of a 2.5 point underdog like they were last year. So that I would attribute to nothing except the bump that comes with making the national championship. The other thing is that I'm not a gambling man, but if I were, the number one spread I would jump at here is Notre Dame -12.5 at Arkansas.
You don't think they're covering?
No, I think Notre Dame is covering.
Okay.
I don't think Arkansas is a particularly good football team. I think Notre Dame is going to be up against that crowd in that environment and that conference specifically. And I think the amount of hype that Notre Dame will have coming into it, plus they're going to be coming off like a quasi bye because they'll have just killed Purdue. I think USC, who knows whether I have no idea what they're going to be this year, so I wouldn't touch that. Boise State, I feel like that could be the kind of game where like it never feels close, but Boise State winds up covering because they're the kind of team that, like, if Notre Dame is on, like, Boise State can keep pace, but they're not gonna actually threaten Notre Dame, but they could still end up covering 15.5. I could easily see them do that. I don't think Arkansas is gonna keep that game close.
I hate, and I'm not much of a gambling man either. Tried it. Didn't have a good enough system or whatever you want to say. I was like, I'm losing too much money here. This is stupid. I'd rather just watch the game for fun. Don't like double-digit point spreads on the road, though, for whatever reason. And that's, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if that we'll have like a whole month of games to go through to get there, but I wouldn't be shocked if that balloons up to like the 15 to 17 point category. And at that point, I'm not touching it. But 12.5, yeah, you make a good case. All you got to do is beat the guys by 2 touchdowns. But then all Arkansas has to do is backdoor cover a 17-point game into a 10-point game. So I don't like double-digit point spreads, but the bigger premise there is I also don't like Arkansas in terms of not just because they're Arkansas, but like I don't like the team this year. And Sam Pittman, there's uncertainty of like, is this his last year, or was last year going to be his last year? All of that. I don't think they're a particularly good, sound football program right now. So if you do think like Jack, I wouldn't hold that against you, because I think Notre Dame could go down there and throttle them for sure.
It's weird because Arkansas is such a weird team because I like their quarterback a lot, Taylor Green. I have him as the second best quarterback on Notre Dame's schedule. I think there's like a cluster of 4 or 5 or 6 guys you can put behind Beck. And I will actually disagree with you on one thing, in that I don't like Arkansas because they're Arkansas, but also because I don't.
I got too many friends that went there to say that, but I guess they give it to me all the time about Texas, so I'll say that right here.
Arkansas Twitter will probably find this clip because they're lunatics, but
they might.
September.
Good show as always, folks. And please hit the thumbs up on this video if you have not done so yet. Subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel for more content. We'll be live tomorrow night with Tim Hyde. Recruiting show, Jack, you were correct. It is on Fridays. We're actually going to move it to Saturday at 6 p.m. this week because we will be at Irish Invasion on Friday, and we'll be Kyle and I will do a video after that, so you can find a little Irish Invasion recap. We'll, of course, have plenty of content on our site, and then we'll have a long-form show on Saturday at 6 p.m., which is...
Are you actually doing a show Saturday at 6 p.m.?
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't believe you.
I'm doing it, bro. You know what? I bet you Mark with Glasses is going to be... I bet we'll have the crew. People are going to watch. And if not... Look, Kyle said he's available. I asked him if he's got anything going on. He said, bro, I'm not doing anything in June. I'm just in front of my laptop. So I said, good. So, all right. So we'll see you then. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, folks, hit the thumbs up if you have not done so yet. This is Notre Dame Six Pack Show. We'll be live next on June 10th for this show. So again, we will catch you guys later. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're just watching now, rewind, watch from the beginning. And yeah, your boy's struggling to sign off, so we're just going to end it there. Appreciate you all for watching. We'll catch you next time.